Stop resisting. Officer Derek Hutchins' baton came down with brutal force. The 34-year-old black woman collapsed onto the asphalt, blood pooling beneath her head. Within hours, she'd be in a coma. Within days, the FBI would launch a federal investigation. What the officers didn't know, they had just assaulted a decorated federal civil rights attorney who had spent the last decade investigating police corruption. Nobody knew they were creating the case that would dismantle an entire department. Richmond, Virginia. March 15, 2024. 9:47 p.m. Dr. Jasmine Carter pulled her silver Honda Accord into the parking lot of FreshValue Supermarket on Westbrook Avenue. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the half-empty lot. She gathered her reusable shopping bags from the passenger seat, checking her phone one last time. A text from her daughter, "Mom, when you coming home? Can we watch a movie?" Jasmine smiled and typed back, "30 minutes, baby. Pick something good." She wore simple jeans and a Spelman College sweatshirt, her alma mater, though she rarely advertised her educational pedigree. No jewelry except her grandmother's silver locket and her wedding ring from her late husband, Daniel, who'd passed from cancer 3 years ago. Nothing flashy. Nothing that drew attention. Jasmine had learned long ago that invisibility was a survival strategy for black women in America. At 34 years old, Jasmine Carter was a senior attorney with the Southern Justice Coalition, a nonprofit legal organization that specialized in civil rights cases. For the past 12 years, she'd worked on police brutality cases, wrongful conviction appeals, and systematic discrimination lawsuits across 6 southern states. Her office walls displayed commendations from the NAACP, certificates of appreciation from the Department of Justice, and framed photographs of clients whose lives she'd helped restore. 3 years ago, she'd won a landmark $8.5 million settlement against the Savannah Police Department for a pattern of racial profiling. But tonight, she was just a tired single mother buying groceries for her 8-year-old daughter, Imani. The supermarket was quiet for a Friday night. Most shoppers had already finished their weekly runs. Jasmine moved efficiently through the aisles, her mental list guiding her path. Fresh vegetables for Sunday dinner. Chicken breasts for Imani's favorite lemon pepper recipe. Rice. Orange juice. Strawberries, Imani's obsession lately. At the checkout, the young cashier, a college-aged black woman named Keisha, according to her name tag, gave Jasmine a tired smile. "Long day?" Jasmine asked kindly. "Double shift," Keisha sighed. "Paying for textbooks." Jasmine added an extra $20 to her tip without saying anything. She remembered those days, working 3 jobs through law school, studying until 3 a.m., choosing between groceries and textbooks. "Good luck with your studies," Jasmine said warmly. "Thank you so much," Keisha's eyes brightened. "Have a blessed night." 9:58 p.m. The parking lot. Jasmine loaded her groceries into the trunk, humming softly to an old Mary J. Blige song playing through her AirPods. The March evening was cool but pleasant. Spring was finally arriving in Richmond after a brutal winter. She didn't notice the police cruiser pulling in behind her vehicle at first. 2 officers emerged from cruiser number 347. Officer Derek Hutchins, 42 years old, 15-year veteran with the Richmond Police Department. His record included 12 internal affairs complaints, all mysteriously dismissed. His face carried the hardened look of a man who'd stopped seeing people as human years ago. Officer Marcus Webb, 28, 5 years on the force. Younger, hungrier, trying to prove himself to veterans like Hutchins. His disciplinary file included 2 excessive force complaints and 1 accusation of racial slurs, also dismissed. Both white. Both members of the Westbrook precinct that had been quietly flagged by multiple civil rights organizations for its pattern of targeting black residents. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," Hutchins barked, his hand already resting on his service weapon. Jasmine pulled out 1 AirPod and turned, confused. Her attorney instincts immediately cataloged details: 2 officers, no backup, positioning themselves on either side of her vehicle, body cameras visible but angled oddly. "I'm sorry, is there a problem, officer?" I said, "Step away from the vehicle. Now." His voice carried the practiced authority of someone used to immediate obedience. Jasmine's pulse quickened, but her training held firm. "Stay calm. Hands visible. Voice steady. Document everything mentally." "Of course, officer." She stepped back from her trunk, her hands raised slightly at chest level, palms open and visible. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "Your vehicle matches the description of one involved in an armed robbery 2 blocks from here 15 minutes ago. We need to search it." Jasmine's mind raced. Armed robbery. 2 blocks away. 15 minutes ago. She'd been inside the supermarket for at least 20 minutes, with timestamp receipts and security footage to prove it. "I understand your concern, officer. I've been shopping inside FreshValue for the past 25 minutes. I have a receipt with a timestamp if that would help clarify." "Are you refusing to cooperate?" Webb interjected, moving closer to her right side. "No, sir. I'm completely willing to cooperate. I'm just offering information that might help resolve this quickly. My daughter is waiting for me at home." Hutchins' jaw tightened. Something about her calm, articulate responses seemed to irritate him. "You a lawyer or something?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Jasmine recognized it immediately, the suspicion and hostility that came when black people demonstrated education or knowledge of their rights. "I work in legal services, yes. But that's not relevant here. I'm simply asking about the procedure so I can cooperate appropriately." That answer, perfectly reasonable, professionally stated, was her first mistake. "Turn around. Hands on the vehicle. Now." Jasmine's attorney brain screamed warnings, but her survival instincts knew better than to argue. She complied immediately, turning to face her trunk, placing her palms flat against the cold metal. "I'm complying, officer. I just want to understand." "You talk too much," Hutchins growled. "That's your problem. You people always got something to say." "You people." The phrase landed like a slap. Webb approached from her right side, his body camera conspicuously angled toward the ground rather than the interaction. Jasmine noticed another veteran move. Another red flag. This wasn't about a robbery description. This was something else. "What's in the bags?" Webb demanded, shining his flashlight into her trunk. "Groceries, officer. Vegetables, chicken, rice. You're welcome to look." "Smart mouth on this one," Hutchins muttered to Webb. Without warning, Hutchins grabbed Jasmine's right wrist and twisted it behind her back with violent force. The sudden torque sent lightning bolts of pain up her arm. "Ah! Officer, what are you? I'm not resisting." "Stop resisting!" Hutchins shouted, loud enough to carry across the parking lot. But Jasmine wasn't resisting. Her left hand remained planted on the trunk. Her body stayed still except for the involuntary flinch from pain. Her voice remained controlled despite the fear flooding her system. This was the script. The manufactured justification she'd seen in dozens of her cases. Create the appearance of resistance where none exists. Shout commands to establish audio cover. Escalate force to justify violence. She knew this playbook intimately. She'd deposed officers who'd used it. She'd cross-examined police chiefs who defended it. She'd won cases against departments that institutionalized it. But knowing the playbook didn't protect her from becoming its next victim. Webb's baton materialized in her peripheral vision, sliding free from his belt with a practiced motion that spoke of frequent use. "Please," Jasmine kept her voice steady, her legal training fighting against her rising terror. "I have a daughter waiting at home. I'm not resisting. I'm cooperating fully." The first strike hit her lower back, just above her right kidney. The pain exploded through her body like she'd been struck by lightning. Jasmine's knees buckled involuntarily. The second strike caught her left shoulder blade. She pitched forward, her face slamming against the sharp edge of her trunk. The impact shattered her nose. Blood exploded across her face, warm and copper-tasting. Her vision blurred with tears and trauma. "Stop. Please." "I'm not." Hutchins' knee drove into her spine with his full weight behind it, forcing her down onto the asphalt. The rough pavement scraped her cheek raw. Her glasses, the wire-rimmed ones Daniel had helped her pick out 5 years ago, flew off her face, skittering under a nearby car. Without them, the world became a blur of lights and shadows and pain. The beating escalated with terrifying speed and systematic precision. Webb's baton came down on her ribcage, 1, 2, 3 measured strikes. Each impact drove the air from her lungs. Jasmine tried to curl into a defensive position, her body's instinctive attempt at self-preservation. But Hutchins grabbed a fistful of her hair, the natural curls she'd stopped straightening after Daniel died, wearing them as armor and identity, and yanked her head back with savage force. "I said stop resisting, bitch." But she wasn't resisting. She was barely conscious. She was just trying to survive. Jasmine's mind fragmented between present horror and professional detachment. Part of her was being beaten on a parking lot. Another part was cataloging evidence, number of strikes, use of racial language, witness positions, camera angles. Even dying, she was building a case. A fourth blow caught the base of her skull. The world exploded into white light, like a flashbulb detonating behind her eyes. Then darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, creeping like spilled ink across paper. Through the haze and the ringing in her ears, Jasmine heard a voice, distant, muffled, but unmistakably horrified. "Hey! Hey! What are you doing to her?" Somewhere in the blur, an elderly man stood near the supermarket entrance, his phone raised high, the screen glowing in the darkness. "Police business. Step back." Webb shouted, immediately repositioning himself between the witness and their actions. But the damage was done. The witness had seen. More importantly, the witness was recording. Hutchins leaned down close to Jasmine's bleeding face. His breath smelled like coffee and hatred. His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her ears. "You should have just shut your mouth and done what you were told, lawyer." The words confirmed what Jasmine already knew in her dimming consciousness: this wasn't random. This was targeted. They knew who she was. One final baton strike to her right temple. Jasmine Carter's world went black. The immediate aftermath, 10:03 p.m. Paramedics arrived 14 minutes after the first 911 call. The responding EMTs, both black women who'd seen too many scenes like this, worked with urgent precision. Jasmine lay motionless in a spreading pool of blood that looked black under the parking lot lights. Her groceries had spilled across the asphalt like a domestic crime scene, oranges rolled into storm drains, the milk carton split open and leaking white across the dark pavement, chicken breasts scattered like evidence markers. Suspect became violent during a routine investigatory stop, Hutchins reported to Sergeant Ray Morrison, who'd arrived as the supervising officer. She matched the description of a suspect involved in an armed robbery. When we attempted to question her, she became combative and aggressive. We used necessary and proportionate force to subdue the threat. The report was smooth, practiced, buttressed by the language of policy and procedure. Necessary force. Proportionate response. Officer safety. The vocabulary of justified violence. Sergeant Morrison, a 20-year veteran who'd learned long ago that protecting officers meant protecting the department, nodded along, taking notes that would become the official narrative. But 15 feet away, Haroldson stood trembling by his 2015 Toyota Camry. Harold, 67 years old, retired postal worker, grandfather of 5, had been returning his shopping cart when he heard the commotion. He'd watched the entire interaction unfold. And crucially, instinctively, he'd pulled out his phone and started recording the moment he heard "Stop resisting" being shouted at a woman who clearly wasn't resisting. His hands still shook as he clutched his phone. The video was 9 minutes and 43 seconds long. It showed everything. That's not what happened, Harold said quietly to Officer Sarah Collins, a rookie who'd arrived with the second response unit. Collins, 24 years old, only 8 months out of the academy, still believed in the oath she'd taken. She looked at Harold's stricken face and something in her gut twisted. "Can you explain what you saw, sir?" Collins asked, pulling out her notepad. She wasn't fighting. Harold's voice shook with emotion. She was just asking questions. Normal questions. She was calm. Polite. She complied with everything they said. And they just started beating her. For no reason. "I have it on video. All of it." Collins glanced over at Hutchins and Webb, who were conferring with Sergeant Morrison. Then she looked back at Harold. "Sir, I need your contact information. All of it. And I need you to preserve that video. Don't post it anywhere yet. Can you do that?" "Why not post it?" Harold asked, confused. "Because we need to secure it as evidence first. Trust me. Please." Something in Collins' earnest expression made Harold nod. He provided his phone number, email, and home address. Collins documented everything with careful precision, her handwriting neat and deliberate. She had a feeling this case was going to explode. And she wanted to be on the right side when it did. Jasmine was loaded into the ambulance with desperate speed. The senior EMT, Patricia Williams, had seen enough police beating victims to recognize the signs. Severe head trauma, Patricia called out readings to her partner. Blood pressure 80/50 and dropping. Traumatic brain injury likely. 3, possibly 4 fractured ribs. Broken nose. Severe internal bleeding. We're losing her. The ambulance screamed toward VCU Medical Center, lights blazing through Richmond's Friday night traffic. Inside, Patricia worked to keep Jasmine alive. She'd seen this pattern too many times, black bodies broken by blue uniforms, explanations that never quite added up, investigations that mysteriously went nowhere. But something about this woman felt different. The Spelman College sweatshirt. The way her hands had manicured nails despite the violence. The leather briefcase visible in the back seat of her car. "Who are you?" Patricia whispered, checking Jasmine's fading pulse. 10:47 p.m. Richmond. The call came to Jasmine's emergency contact at 10:47 p.m. Isaiah Carter answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Hello? Is this Isaiah Carter, brother of Jasmine Carter?" The formal tones snapped him immediately awake. "Yes. What's wrong?" "This is VCU Medical Center. Your sister has been brought to our emergency room with severe injuries. You're listed as her emergency contact. We need you to come immediately." Isaiah, 32 years old, investigative journalist for the Richmond Chronicle, winner of 2 regional journalism awards for his exposés on government corruption, felt his blood turn to ice. What kind of injuries? What happened? The police report indicates she was involved in an altercation with officers. "Sir, you need to come now. It's serious." Isaiah was moving before the call ended, throwing on clothes, grabbing his keys and his professional camera bag. Old journalist habits died hard. He called his wife, Monica, told her to check on Imani at Jasmine's house, and drove toward the hospital with his mind racing. Police report. Altercation with officers. His sister was a civil rights attorney who'd spent 12 years suing police departments. The coincidence felt weaponized. 11:23 p.m. VCU Medical Center ICU. The ICU waiting room smelled like industrial cleaner in desperation. Isaiah burst through the doors to find a trauma surgeon waiting, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, her scrubs still marked with his sister's blood. "Mr. Carter? Where's my sister? What happened?" Dr. Martinez's face carried the exhausted compassion of someone who delivered terrible news professionally. "Your sister sustained severe injuries. Traumatic brain injury with skull fracture. Subdural hematoma causing dangerous brain swelling. 3 fractured ribs, one of which punctured her lung. Broken nose. Severe facial trauma. Internal bleeding that we've managed to control, but what? We've placed her in a medically induced coma to reduce brain swelling and give her body a chance to heal. The next 48 hours are critical. Mr. Carter, I need you to understand, these injuries are consistent with sustained, severe assault. This wasn't a simple altercation. Isaiah's hands clenched into fists. Can I see her? Dr. Martinez led him through sterile corridors into ICU room 7. Nothing could have prepared him. Jasmine lay motionless, her face so swollen and discolored she was almost unrecognizable. Tubes ran from her mouth, her arms, monitoring equipment beeped in rhythm with her fragile heartbeat. Her head was wrapped in white bandages already seeping blood. Her right eye was swollen completely shut. Her left arm was in a cast. Isaiah's knees nearly buckled. His brilliant, strong, beautiful sister, reduced to this broken thing in a hospital bed. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and photographed everything. Every angle. Every injury. Every machine keeping her alive. Old journalist habits. Document everything. What's her prognosis? He asked, his voice barely controlled. Honestly? If she survives the next 48 hours, we'll know more. Right now, I'd estimate 40% chance of survival. If she does survive, we don't know yet what cognitive function she'll retain. Brain injuries are unpredictable. 40% chance of survival. Isaiah stared at his sister's broken body and felt something cold and determined settle in his chest. Jasmine had dedicated her life to fighting injustice. She'd won cases against corrupt police departments across 6 states. She'd freed innocent people from prison. She'd given voice to the voiceless. And now someone had tried to silence her permanently. Standing in that sterile ICU room, staring at his sister's broken body hooked up to machines, Isaiah made a decision. He was going to destroy everyone responsible. He was going to use every investigative skill he'd developed over 10 years of journalism. He was going to burn down the entire system that had allowed this to happen. But first, he needed to make a phone call. Isaiah stepped into the hallway and dialed a number he'd been given by Jasmine 6 months ago, during one of their late-night conversations about her work. If anything ever happens to me, she'd said seriously, call this number. Tell them everything. The phone rang 3 times before a crisp voice answered, FBI Civil Rights Division, Special Agent Torres speaking. My name is Isaiah Carter. My sister is Jasmine Carter, senior attorney with the Southern Justice Coalition. 2 Richmond police officers just beat her into a coma. And I think you need to hear about the investigation she's been conducting on them for the past 18 months. There was a pause. Then, don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'm sending agents to your location immediately. The wheels of federal justice had just started turning. What Officers Hutchins and Webb didn't know, what Sergeant Morrison didn't know, what the entire Richmond Police Department didn't know, was that they had just brutalized one of the most connected civil rights attorneys in the Southeast. Jasmine Carter had worked on 7 federal civil rights cases with the FBI. She had contacts throughout the Department of Justice. She'd testified before congressional committees on police reform. She had the personal cell phone numbers of 3 U.S. senators, 2 federal judges, and the current Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. More critically, she'd been quietly building a case against the Richmond Police Department for the past 18 months. A pattern and practice investigation documenting systematic racial profiling, excessive force, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations spanning 3 years and involving 23 officers. Her files, meticulously documented, legally bulletproof, backed by video evidence and sworn testimony, sat in a safe deposit box at Richmond Community Bank. Digital copies were stored on an encrypted server accessible only to her and 3 trusted colleagues. The beating hadn't been random bad luck or a tragic misunderstanding. It had been a targeted attack on the wrong person. And within hours, the full weight of federal law enforcement would prove exactly how catastrophically wrong these officers had been. Harold Chen's 9-minute video was already uploaded to cloud storage, backed up on 3 devices, and secured as evidence. The recording showed everything: Jasmine's compliance, the officer's aggression, the manufactured justification, the brutal beating. Officer Sarah Collins had already filed her own incident report documenting the discrepancies between the official narrative and Harold's testimony. She'd kept a copy for herself, sensing she might need protection. And in a medical safe in the VCU Medical Center security office, hospital staff had preserved Jasmine's clothing and photographed every injury, standard protocol for assault victims, but devastatingly damning for police perpetrators. The case was already building itself. All it needed was someone to ignite the fuse. Isaiah Carter, standing in that hospital hallway, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking to an FBI agent who'd been waiting for exactly this call. He was the spark. And Richmond was about to burn. 2 days before the beating, March 13, 2024. Jasmine Carter's corner office at the Southern Justice Coalition occupied the 4th floor of a converted tobacco warehouse in downtown Richmond. Exposed brick walls displayed framed newspaper articles chronicling her victories. Local attorney wins $8.5 million settlement against Savannah PD. Carter secures release of wrongfully convicted man after 16 years. Civil rights lawyer named rising star by National Bar Association. But the wall behind her desk told a different story, one the public never saw. A massive corkboard stretched 8 feet wide, covered in photographs, documents, and red string connecting faces and incidents like a detective's murder board. At the center, 23 photographs of Richmond Police Department officers. And at the top of that web sat 2 names circled in red marker, Officer Derek Hutchins and Officer Marcus Webb. Jasmine had been building this case for 18 months. It started with a phone call from a terrified mother named Angela Preston. Her 19-year-old son, Terrence, had been beaten so severely by Richmond police during a traffic stop that he'd lost vision in his left eye. The official report claimed Terrence had attacked the officers first. But Angela's son had a video that told a different story. Jasmine took the case pro bono. What she discovered launched her down a rabbit hole that consumed her life. The pattern she uncovered. Terrence Preston wasn't an isolated incident. He was victim number 7 in a 3-year pattern of systematic brutality targeting black residents in Richmond's Westbrook neighborhood. Jasmine's investigation uncovered 16 documented cases of excessive force by the same group of officers. Falsified police reports in 14 of those cases. Missing body camera footage in 11 incidents, all mysteriously corrupted or lost. Internal affairs complaints that were systematically dismissed by supervisors. Civil settlements totaling $2.3 million paid out quietly to victims who signed non-disclosure agreements. A closed social media group where officers shared racist memes and coordinated their stories. The deeper Jasmine dug, the uglier it became. She discovered that Officers Hutchins and Webb were part of an unofficial group within the department that called themselves the Westbrook Boys, 8 officers who worked the Westbrook precinct and had a reputation for aggressive policing of black neighborhoods. Their text message chains, which Jasmine obtained through a whistleblower, contained explicit racial slurs, jokes about teaching respect, and discussions about which civil rights attorneys were causing problems. Jasmine's name appeared in those discussions 17 times. The whistleblower. Officer Marcus Thompson had been with Richmond PD for 11 years. He was black, one of only 43 black officers in a department of 312. He'd watched the Westbrook Boys operate for years, seen the pattern, reported it internally, and been ignored. Then he watched them beat a 16-year-old black girl during a shoplifting stop. The girl had cerebral palsy. The officers claimed she was resisting. Thompson's body camera showed the truth. When Internal Affairs buried his report, Thompson reached out to Jasmine. Their first meeting happened in a Starbucks 40 minutes outside Richmond. Thompson arrived in civilian clothes, his hands shaking as he slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything's on here," Thompson said quietly. Body camera footage they claimed was lost. Text message archives. Internal memos showing supervisors knew about the pattern and covered it up. Financial records showing settlements. Everything. "Why are you doing this?" Jasmine asked. "Because I have a daughter," Thompson's voice cracked. "She's 14. And every time I see one of these videos, I see her. I didn't become a cop to protect people like Hutchins. I became a cop to stop them." That USB drive contained evidence that would eventually bring down 23 officers and expose corruption reaching the chief's office. But it also made Jasmine Carter a target. The warning signs. 3 months before her beating, Jasmine noticed she was being followed. A gray Dodge Charger that appeared too often in her rearview mirror. Always keeping 3 cars back. Always disappearing before she could get a plate number. She reported it. Nothing happened. 2 months before the beating, her office was broken into. Nothing stolen, her laptop, her phone, her purse all untouched. But files had been disturbed. Someone had been searching for something. She reported it. The investigation went nowhere. 1 month before the beating, Jasmine received an anonymous text message, "Drop the Richmond case or your daughter won't be safe." She took screenshots. Filed a police report. Requested FBI protection. Was told there wasn't sufficient evidence to justify federal involvement. Jasmine didn't drop the case. Instead, she accelerated it. She moved all her evidence to secure locations, encrypted cloud storage, safe deposit boxes, copies with 3 trusted colleagues. She documented everything, every threat, every suspicious incident, every attempt at intimidation. And she kept building her case, knowing she was running out of time. Who Jasmine really was, the origin story. To understand why Jasmine fought so hard, you had to understand where she came from. Jasmine and Isaiah Carter grew up in Richmond's South Side neighborhood, not the gentrified areas tourists visited, but the streets where poverty and resilience lived side by side. Their father, James Carter, worked as a mechanic. Their mother, Patricia, cleaned houses for wealthy families in the West End. Money was always tight, but love was abundant. Their parents instilled in them a fierce belief in education, justice, and fighting for what's right. Jasmine was 10 years old when she watched police officers beat her father during a traffic stop. They were driving home from her basketball game. James had a broken taillight, something he'd been meaning to fix but couldn't afford yet. The officers pulled them over. What should have been a simple warning escalated when James questioned why he was being asked to step out of the vehicle for a taillight. 10-year-old Jasmine watched from the back seat as officers slammed her father against the hood of their car. Watched them punch him repeatedly while her mother screamed. Watched them arrest him for resisting when he'd done nothing but ask questions. Her father spent 3 days in jail. The charges were eventually dropped, but the medical bills for his broken ribs and concussion nearly bankrupted their family. That night changed Jasmine's life trajectory forever. "Don't be angry," her father told her weeks later, his ribs still wrapped in bandages. "Be educated. Be prepared. Be the person who can stop this from happening to other families." Jasmine carried those words through high school, where she graduated valedictorian. Through Spelman College, where she studied political science and sociology. Through Howard University Law School, where she specialized in civil rights law and graduated in the top 5% of her class. She could have gone to prestigious corporate firms that recruited her aggressively. Starting salary $190,000. Partnership track. Corner office. Security. Instead, she joined the Southern Justice Coalition for $52,000 a year in a mission to fight the system that had broken her father. The cases that built her reputation. Over 12 years, Jasmine Carter built a reputation as one of the most fearless civil rights attorneys in the Southeast. The Savannah case, 2019. Jasmine represented 7 black residents who'd been systematically targeted by a police unit conducting illegal stop-and-frisk operations. She uncovered that the unit had quotas for arrests in black neighborhoods and fabricated probable cause in 40% of their stops. The federal settlement was $8.5 million, and led to the disbandment of the entire unit. The Williams exoneration, 2020. Jasmine took on the case of Marcus Williams, a black man who'd spent 16 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. She discovered that police had coerced witnesses, hidden exculpatory evidence, and fabricated testimony. Marcus was released, and the city paid $4.2 million in compensation. The Jackson family case, 2022. When police killed 17-year-old Deshaun Jackson during a welfare check at his home, shooting him 7 times while he held a video game controller they claimed was a weapon, Jasmine represented his family. She proved the officers never attempted de-escalation and that their body cam footage had been edited. The jury awarded the family $12 million. Each victory made her more renowned. And each victory made her more dangerous to corrupt officers. Her personal sacrifice. The work consumed Jasmine's life. Late nights reviewing case files. Weekends interviewing witnesses. Vacations canceled for court appearances. Her husband, Daniel, understood. He was a high school history teacher who shared her passion for justice. They'd met at a community organizing meeting and bonded over their commitment to making Richmond better. But the work took its toll. When Daniel was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2020, Jasmine tried to balance his treatment with her caseload. She was in the middle of the Jackson case, the one that would define her career. Daniel insisted she keep working. "Those families need you," he told her during his chemotherapy sessions. "I'm not going anywhere." But he did. Daniel Carter died on November 3, 2021, with Jasmine holding his hand, Imani crying at the foot of his hospital bed, and case files still scattered across the room because Jasmine had been working even in those final hours. The guilt nearly broke her. For 3 months, she barely functioned. Isaiah moved in temporarily to help with Imani. Colleagues covered her cases. Therapists told her she needed to process her grief. But what pulled Jasmine back wasn't therapy, it was purpose. She returned to work with even more intensity. If Daniel had believed her work mattered enough to support it even while dying, then she owed it to him to continue. To fight harder. To win more. Imani became her motivation. Every case she won was a world made slightly safer for her daughter. The Richmond investigation, what she'd uncovered. The Richmond PD case was Jasmine's most ambitious undertaking yet. Working with Officer Thompson and 2 other whistleblowers, Jasmine had documented systematic racial profiling, data showing black residents were 73% more likely to be stopped, searched, and arrested in Westbrook despite making up only 43% of the neighborhood population. Excessive force pattern, 23 officers responsible for 89% of use of force incidents over 3 years. Evidence tampering, body camera footage routinely malfunctioning during controversial encounters. Financial corruption, officers receiving overtime pay for hours not worked, with supervisors approving the fraud. Civil rights violations, illegal searches, false arrests, fabricated evidence, and intimidation of witnesses. Command responsibility, evidence that supervisors up to the deputy chief level knew about the pattern and actively suppressed investigations. Her case file ran 847 pages. She had video evidence, audio recordings, financial documents, and sworn affidavits from 12 victims willing to testify. She'd been scheduled to present her findings to the FBI Civil Rights Division on March 18, 3 days after her beating. The case had the potential to trigger a federal consent decree, force systematic reforms, remove corrupt leadership, and result in criminal charges against multiple officers. It would have been the biggest police accountability case in Virginia history. And officers Hutchins and Webb knew about it. The confrontation 2 weeks earlier. February 28, 2024. Jasmine was leaving the courthouse after a hearing on a different case. She walked to her car and found Officer Hutchins leaning against it. "Ms. Carter," he said with a cold smile. "We need to talk." Jasmine's hand went to her phone. "I don't talk to subjects of active investigations without counsel present." "Smart lawyer. That's why you're dangerous." Hutchins pushed off her car and stepped closer. "You're making a mistake going after good cops doing hard jobs. You're making enemies you can't afford." "Are you threatening me, Officer Hutchins. I'm warning you. Richmond isn't like other cities you've sued. We protect our own here. You keep pushing this case, and you'll regret it. Jasmine recorded the entire exchange on her phone. She filed a formal complaint. It was buried by internal affairs within 48 hours. She knew then that they were coming for her. She just didn't know when or how. The files that would change everything. In her safe deposit box at Richmond Community Bank sat 3 folders. Folder 1, the Westbrook Boys, complete dossiers on 23 officers, including documentation of their history, patterns of behavior, connections to each other, and evidence of coordinated misconduct. Folder 2, command failure evidence showing supervisors knew about the pattern, including internal emails, memos suppressing investigations, and financial records of settlements paid to silence victims. Folder 3, the federal case, her complete legal brief for federal intervention, including the constitutional violations, the pattern and practice evidence, and her recommendation for a consent decree. Digital copies were encrypted and stored with her colleague attorney Marcus Freeman in Atlanta, Professor Regina Washington at Howard Law School, and the Southern Justice Coalition's executive director, David Chin. If anything happened to Jasmine, those files would automatically be released. Which is exactly what was about to occur. 11:47 p.m., March 15, the call that changed everything. Isaiah stood in the hospital hallway, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking to FBI Special Agent Maria Torres from the Civil Rights Division. My sister has been investigating Richmond PD for 18 months, Isaiah said, his voice steady despite his rage. She was scheduled to present her findings to you in 3 days. Tonight, 2 of the officers she's been investigating beat her into a coma. This wasn't random. This was retaliation. Mr. Carter, I need you to listen carefully. Agent Torres' voice was sharp and focused. Do not speak to any local police. Do not give any statements. Do not post anything on social media. Can you do that? Yes. I'm mobilizing a team immediately. We'll be at VCU Medical Center within 2 hours. Your sister's investigation, do you know where she kept her files? Safe deposit box at Richmond Community Bank. And she sent encrypted copies to 3 colleagues. Names? Isaiah provided them. He could hear Agent Torres typing rapidly. Mr. Carter, I need you to understand something. If this is what you believe it is, if this was a targeted attack on a federal cooperating witness conducting a civil rights investigation, we're not talking about local charges. We're talking about federal civil rights violations, conspiracy, witness intimidation, attempted murder. These officers are looking at life in prison. Isaiah looked through the ICU window at his sister's broken body. Good, he said coldly. That's not nearly enough, but it's a start. The FBI response, unprecedented speed. At 12:15 a.m. on March 16, Special Agent Maria Torres convened an emergency response team at the FBI's Richmond field office. Within 30 minutes, 6 special agents were assigned to the case. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division was notified. A federal prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office was briefed. Surveillance teams were dispatched to monitor officers Hutchins and Webb. Federal warrants were being prepared for devices, communications, and financial records. By 1:30 a.m., FBI agents had obtained Harold Chen's video footage, secured Officer Sarah Collins' incident report, retrieved Jasmine's clothing and medical photographs from VCU Medical Center, made contact with Officer Marcus Thompson, the whistleblower, begun the process of accessing Jasmine's safe deposit box under emergency provisions. By 3 a.m., Special Agent Torres stood in the VCU Medical Center ICU, looking at Jasmine Carter's broken body, and made a decision. This case was going to be fast-tracked with every resource the federal government could bring to bear. Because Jasmine Carter wasn't just a victim. She was one of them, a civil rights attorney who'd worked alongside the FBI on 7 previous cases. An officer of the court. A cooperating witness in an active federal investigation. The FBI protected its own. And someone was going to pay. What officers Hutchins and Webb didn't know. As officers Hutchins and Webb finished their shift at 2 a.m. on March 16, celebrating what they thought was a successful message to a troublesome attorney, they had no idea that their text messages were already being subpoenaed. Their financial records were being examined for evidence of corruption. Their body camera footage, including the malfunctions, was being forensically analyzed. Federal surveillance teams were tracking their every movement. 18 months of Jasmine's investigation was now in FBI hands. Multiple officers were already being approached to flip and testify against them. A federal grand jury would be convened within 72 hours. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd silenced a threat. They had no idea they'd just triggered the largest federal civil rights investigation in Virginia history. Isaiah's promise. Standing in his sister's ICU room at 4 a.m., Isaiah Carter made a recording on his phone. His voice was calm, measured, and absolutely lethal in its certainty. My name is Isaiah Carter. I'm an investigative journalist with the Richmond Chronicle. On March 15, 2024, at approximately 10 p.m., 2 Richmond Police Department officers beat my sister, civil rights attorney Jasmine Carter, into a coma in the parking lot of FreshValue Supermarket. My sister has devoted 12 years of her life to fighting police brutality and corruption. She has freed innocent people from prison. She has won justice for families destroyed by police violence. She has exposed systematic corruption in 6 different police departments. And tonight, she was brutally beaten by the very officers she was investigating. To officers Derek Hutchins and Marcus Webb, you picked the wrong person. You attacked a woman with connections throughout the federal justice system. You assaulted a cooperating witness in a federal investigation. You created evidence that will destroy not just you, but the entire corrupt system that protected you. My sister spent 18 months building a case against you. I'm going to spend however long it takes to ensure that case becomes your prison sentence. This video will remain private until the appropriate time. But when it's released, the whole world will know your names and what you did. You thought you could silence her. All you did was amplify her voice. And I promise you, Jasmine Carter will have justice. Isaiah saved the video. He would hold it until the moment when it would cause maximum damage. Then he sat beside his sister's bed, held her hand carefully to avoid the 4 lines, and began making a list of everyone who needed to be called, every connection that needed to be activated, every weapon in their arsenal that needed to be deployed. The war had begun. And officers Hutchins and Webb had no idea they'd already lost.